next to David Horowitz. Horowitz is the editor-in-chief of the Times of Israel, who this last week wrote a stunning, incredible, in-depth, exclusive, published just a little bit before Shabbat, called 48 Surreal Hours in Damascus, an Israeli reporter's travelogue from an enemy capital. I strongly encourage you to read it when you can. It is inspiring, it is hopeful, it's thought-provoking, all the things we hope for from an article we want to read this time of year. And I really hope that my talking about it tonight is not going to dim your desire to explore it, but only feed that and give you another reason to experience it for yourself. And before I really begin, I do want to take a moment to acknowledge that so much has happened since we gathered last for Shabbat here in Canada, at the United Nations, in Israel. But on Shabbat Shuvah, it is the potential for change. That is the most important message that we can give. That is the most important message that we can receive. So Horowitz reveals in his 48-hour travelogue that this entire trip is actually because of Rav Asher. It's Rav Asher's second trip to Syria this year. His first was with Syrian Jews who, still viewing themselves as exiles, were invited to come back by the Syrian government. And he was so moved by this first mission that he created another one, inviting Jewish academics and community leaders to join him on a trip to Damascus to, quote, build relationships between Syria and Jews to influence both the United States and the Israeli government to come to a closer relationship with the new Syrian government and to help the Syrian people. Jerusalem to Damascus is, as Horowitz will tell you, around 140 miles or a 3.5-hour drive with light traffic. That's around the same as a drive from here to Algonquin Park. But of course, there is no direct route from Israel to Syria. To get there, first you have to fly to Greece. And from Greece you have to fly to Turkey, because there have been no flights from Israel to Turkey since October 7th. And then finally from Turkey, you can fly to Syria. This is not his only moment of geography shock during the trip. He also sees road signs for Lebanon straight ahead and Iraq next right, which baffle his Israeli sentiments. As he moves through Syria, one of the themes that he lifts up again and again for us, his readers, is not so long ago, there was a thriving Jewish community here. And you can still literally find it amongst the rubble of civil war and ethnic cleansing. In the city of Jobar, which was attacked by the forces of the former Syrian president Bashar al-Assad for 11 years going, there was once a beautiful synagogue called the Eliyahu Hanavi synagogue, because the Syrian Jews who lived there said, below our synagogue is a cave. And this cave is where Elijah the prophet hid from Queen Jezebel when she was hunting him. Today, the synagogue, the cave, even the plaque which dated it are gone. They are rubble and dust, destroyed by mortars, destroyed by fire, and then looted by those looking for artifacts to sell. In one of the photos in the article, Rav Asher picks up something from the debris. It could be just a piece of curled and decaying wood. It could be just a ruined piece of that synagogue, which is no more. But in its curl and in its size, there is something haunting and familiar. It could just be a broken shofar. This is a Rorschach test with no good answers. The Jewish cemetery of Damascus has seen the Syrian Jewish community dwindle from 100,000 Jews at the turn of the 20th century to 15,000 Jews after the establishment of the State of Israel to a literal handful today. Figures suggest that there are 6 Syrian Jews left alive today in the entire country of Syria, and they still bury their dead in this synagogue, in this cemetery. Toi toi. Rabbi Chaim Vital, one of the greatest of the Kabbalists, the primary disciple of Yitzchak Luria, for whom Lurianic Kabbalah is named, his tomb is found amongst these graves. It is another reminder of the prominent place that Syria once had in international Jewish life. And whether by providence or luck, the shrine is untouched, even as parts of the cemetery have been paved over by the previous regime to make room for new roads. As the group arrives in Damascus, a surprise awaits them at their next stop. Bronze inlaid doors of another abandoned Syrian synagogue, covered in intricate design work and semi-precious mosaic, have been, quote unquote, found, or perhaps recovered. It's unclear exactly. They were stolen off of the synagogue the week before, but the Syrian police recovered them, found them, rescued them, got them back. Either way, fortunately for everyone, the Syrian press has also been alerted, and they are there to record the grateful reactions of the visiting Jews. This current government is very keen to publicly demonstrate their tolerance for and interest in a revival of its former minority. But having made it to Damascus, Horowitz then proceeds to detail something incredible and unexpected. The Al-Farnajeh synagogue of Damascus was built by Jews who fled Spain during the Reconquista of the 15th century. It has been locked up for nearly 30 years, since the early 1990s when a Syrian government allowed its Jews to leave. Very few have entered since then, but the group, accompanied by one of Syria's final 6 Jews, are allowed to go in. Horowitz writes, "For all of us visitors, I think, this is one of the most moving parts of our stay. Reviving prayer, davening with a minyan in a very old synagogue that is nonetheless completely intact. It feels like the former Jewish worshippers have just left the building." Shitrik leads the service. Lopatin opens the ark and takes out a Sefer Torah for the brief Monday reading, and we sing, "V'zot Torah." This is the Torah. Jajati performs Hagbah, displays the scroll for all. People call to the bima, and the scroll is returned. For the first time in decades, a minyan davens not only in this shul, but in all of Damascus. And a few minutes later, they go get hummus. Quote, "We'll be eating hummus in Damascus," was once an iconic Israeli saying that described a much longed for and now sometimes nostalgic dream of regional peace. But for this small group, 1 week before Rosh Hashanah, it's a vision of what might be. In Israel, there is also another phrase, another word from a bygone time that's not so common anymore. It's a little quaint and old-fashioned now. It's mostly taught in old Ulpan books, and that word is friar. A friar is best translated as a sucker. The person who waits in line when they could have just gone straight to the front, that person is a friar. The person who overpays in the shuk, a friar. A politician that signs treaties based on promises that no one will ever keep, that is the worst kind of friar. Today, in dealing with this new Syrian government, there is a very justifiable tension between being a friar and missing an open window. This new Syrian president, Ahmad al-Shara, is former Al-Qaeda. He had a multi-million-dollar bounty on his head until just last year. He also publicly denounced their ideology and has made public statements that the Syria he rules will be open to all faiths and all ideologies. And by and large, except very notably for the violence targeting the Druze community in the south of Syria, the north of Israel, he has kept that promise. Is trusting him, trying to build alliances with him, making room at the table for him, is that the work of regional and international peacemaking? Or is that throwing wool over your own eyes? Are the violent outbursts near the Golan a sign of the real Al-Shara, the Al-Shara that's just waiting to come out? Or is that just a symptom of the struggle to hold tribal and ideological alliances together after your shared enemy has been deposed? The politicians that Horowitz and Lopatin met with on this trip are eloquent and respected. They are Western-style ministers, and they are adamant that this is a government which wants, above all, stability. They want to make sure that Hezbollah and Iran remain gone from Syria, that they want a regional status quo, and that is a status quo that benefits Israel. But more than that, they claim it's open to peaceful relationships with its southern neighbor. It has not ruled out signing the Abraham Accords, and they are dedicated to building a Syria where the Jews who were forced out are free to return and are free to rebuild. So this is the great question then. Is Syria on the brink of making one of the greatest moments of tshuva in modern history? Is it about to go from being a despotic puppet nation that unleashed the most brutal civil war the region has ever seen, with 500,000 casualties and rising? And is it going to restore something and go back towards being healed and reviving this great multicultural center that it was at the crossroads of the Middle East for centuries? Or is this just really exceptionally good PR? Tshuva is messy. It is imprecise. It requires us to believe that people want to be better. And when you take that kind of risk on someone, blind faith that they are who they say they are, that might just make you a friar. But it's also the only Jewish way I know to live. I hope you take the time to read the article. You can find it directly on the Times of Israel. You can Google Times of Israel, 48 hours in Damascus. I tried to make sure it works. And I didn't even mention one of the most incredible things that they see, which includes a Jewish academic coming face to face with her literal life's work. It is well worth your time. As with all repentance, we don't know whether or not this regime change and this potential repair will create genuine transformation in Syria. But today, especially today, on Shabbat Shuvah, it is appropriate to, at the very least, pray and imagine a better world. Shana Tova, Gemar Chatima Tova, Shabbat Shalom.